Hello, and welcome to Kayiu and pkchu's review of Memorium Arcanum for the MSEM format. So basically what we're going to be doing is looking at every card from this set and then evaluating how good or how impactful we think it'll be for constructed play.
Yes, and one of the unique things about Memorium Arcanum is that it doesn't follow the classic rarity system. It's more akin to a cube almost, where it's just a collection of cards.
Yeah, there's no limited environment here. It's very much just a collection of thematically or story-related one-offs. So in that sense, unlike Araloo, which had a lot of cards that wouldn't be relevant outside of the specific limited environment, Memoriam Arcanum has the freedom to kind of go wild with its power level and its designs, which makes almost every card here relevant to some degree.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to start with the two face planeswalkers for the set, Felice and Arita. So Felice, Adira's Salvation, is 2 white. The plus basically makes it so that players can't cast more than one spell, which basically only useful against like Storm or other similar decks. The -3 exiles all other permanents and then returns them to the battlefield tapped, and then also prevents creatures from attacking Felice or you. And then finally, her ultimate returns all permanent cards from the graveyard to the battlefield. I think the main thing that Felice could be used for is as like a situational flicker all of your stuff.
Yeah.
And it also flickers opponent stuff, which could be problematic. But also, like, if you combo this with Sand Scatter, like let's say you like Sand Scatter as your main removal spell, like when Felice flickers the Sand Scatter lands, your opponent loses them permanently. So that's like a neat interaction.
Yeah. It's a cool little interaction, and there are a lot of like ETB triggers that are obviously ones you want to double, but doubling them for your opponent is a little like it makes it tricky to evaluate that part of the card.
Yeah, and at 4 mana, flicker everything. Like for 4 mana is like right about at the edge of like a card needing to be like reasonably impactful. And while Felice is nice, I feel like there needs to be something more substantial, or there needs to be like stronger ETB effects for her to see play.
Yeah, and I wish the +2 was like maybe synergized more with the rest of the card. I mean, it is useful against like Storm decks or something.
Yeah, the problem is it's like at 4 mana, it is usually going to be too slow for Storm.
Yeah.
And we already have like other, like not in white specifically, but we have good anti-Storm cards already in like Onyx Ritualist and Ocean, Keeper of the Shoal. So
even in white, often Mercantile Accords can be good against variants of Storm decks. So
yeah, Landstorm is hard for Merc Accords to hit because of how varied the CMCs are. But yeah, that's definitely like Merc Accords is definitely still a strong card in its own right, and Merc Accords is I think more main deckable than Felice is. So okay, so the next card.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over this one?
Yeah. Arita, Envious Chronomancer is 1 a blue and a red for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Her +1 says to draw 2 cards, and at the beginning of your next end step, you discard your hand. Our -3 is you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a loyalty counter on each Arita planeswalker you control, and our -5 is just take an extra turn after this one.
Mm-hmm.
The +1 here is what really interests me. It fills the graveyard very fast.
Yeah, it feels like there's probably some way to abuse it. Like I'm not sure how, but like this isn't like Phoenix colors. But yeah, it could just potentially be like Mercurio's Familiar. You can bring back from the grave without having any investment. Same thing with like Suisei. So I could see this being played in like, and also like the ability to be able to +1 and then like immediately next turn, if they don't have something to like tick her down, just immediately take another turn can
Yeah.
maybe win you the game in like some like an extra turn spell with like utility is pretty good.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Or maybe in a Phoenix style deck, you can discard your hand, recall your Phoenixes, and then like swing in, take an extra turn, swing in again. I could easily see that being like a really good line of play.
Mm-hmm. I guess
I
the question
don't
is like,
know,
does it make the
like,
cut over like Fated Challenge, where
yeah,
like
I
Fated
don't.
Challenge is more consistent? But we'd have to see.
And on turn 3, would you want to tap out for a Planeswalker, or maybe would you want to like play spells so you can recur your Phoenixes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably play spells, especially because there are Phoenix variants now that are being tested with Aspiring Rascals from Araloo, which makes the cast 3 spells turn 3 even more relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's certainly a pushed card, so it and there are clear homes for it, so it just will probably need to see testing in those homes.
right.
Okay, so moving on to the rest of the set. So we have Culminating Salvation, which is 1 white sorcery. You either create 2 spirit 1/1 spirit tokens with flying, or gain 6 life. You can escalate to pay to like do both. Doesn't seem very good.
No,
I think if it cost
it's
like 1 less, it would be good. Like it would be
yeah, it's
playable.
just really pricey, and the only mode that really matters is creating the 2 spirits.
The gain 6 life can be like, I think like as like a main deck thing versus aggro or something, like a main deckable aggro hate. That
Maybe
definitely. But
it's just like
but you
it
don't want to
costs
be
a
paying
lot.
3 mana for getting 6 life. You want to be doing
Yeah.
something more impactful. So at this price, it's just not worth playing in MSEM, I think. Okay, next we have Felice's Defiance.
Yes, I'll go ahead and read that one. Yeah, so it's X, a white and a white for an instant that says exile X target permanents you control and return to the battlefield under your control next end step. So flicker them, and then you draw a card. I really like this one.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, I said.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I really like this as a way to repeat ETBs. Reminds me a lot of Lazarus Conjuring from Araloo.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's a more powerful card. But this one is pretty useful, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the big differences are Lazarus Conjuring only hits creatures, but Lazarus Conjuring also lets you hit like the same target multiple times. I think Felice's Defiance will probably, if there's like some enchantment ETB type deck, I could see Felice's Defiance being used there. Like Felice's Defiance is a cool card, but I think Felice herself will likely to be played in the slot that Felice's Defiance would go in, if that makes sense. Because Felice herself is likely to be cheaper to do the same effect.
Yeah.
Unless your opponent is running some really devastating ETBs, then it's probably more worth to just run Felice herself.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Felice's Study. It's 1 white. So for those of you who don't know what studies are, because they're an exclusive enchantment subtype in MSVM, essentially when they enter the battlefield, you take the top 5 cards of your library, shuffle them into a new library. So this library, basically, you can do anything that you do with your main library. You can draw for turn, you can mill from it, you can search it, etc. But once that library is empty, it ceases to exist, and then you sacrifice the associated study. And all of the study enchantments give that extra library special effect. Here, it allows you to put a permanent on the bottom of that library. Um, so I know some people were like bouncing around, like looping like permanents like Dark Bargain with Felisa Study, but I think the problem with that is that you can never truly like loop it because there needs to be something in the study for.
Yeah. It seems like something that would be combo-y, but it takes a lot of pieces to work because you have to find a way to sacrifice things or stuff that self-sacrifices, and then you need to also have like a sort of draw engine going.
Mhm. So
It's an interesting effect. I don't know how useful it'll be in looping things because of how the library works. You having to draw the things.
yeah, and I think that like RD Study, like most decks that would play this, like if you're going for a 3-mana enchantment, which focuses on giving you card advantage through permanence, you are probably playing RD Study over this.
Yeah.
So yeah, unless like some like good combo comes up with Felisa Study, I don't expect to see it in many lists, unless it's like I've seen like some green lists which run this as like a pseudo RD Study, but even then, I think it's like it's probably not going to be that good.
Right. It's also just really slow in what it does unless you're not using it unless you're using it for combos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to like empty it first if you, or like not empty it, but like get close to emptying it if you want to like combo off with it. So
Right.
that's another hurdle. I don't think we have any infinite draw engines in MSDM right now, or like the ones that we do are very, very difficult to set up. So,
Yeah,
and
and
also
this also
require
needs
huge
to be
mana.
like a sacrifice-based infinite draw engine. I just don't think we have the pieces for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up is Furtive Witch,
Oh
which
no, no.
is
Oh
2 and
yeah.
a white.
One thing that's important to note is that Furtive Witch is one of the cards that's been replaced in Mac. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah. So instead, there's Heroism, which is white, white, white for an enchantment that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever you cast a white spell, you can have it become an angel creature. And its base stats are a 3/3 flyer.
Okay, okay, I see it.
Um, so I think the problem with this seeing play is it has a very restrictive mana cost. And there's another white, white, white enchantment which is jockeying for the same position.
Yeah. Also, the colors for like tokens, which I'm guessing would be the best application for this, you would basically need to run this in mono white,
Mm-hmm.
unless you want to like shoot yourself with your mana base.
Yeah. And it's just like there are better win cons out there, really.
Yeah.
If like I could see running this as a win con if like there wasn't good instant speed creature kill or there wasn't good ways to deal with enchantments, but there are. This format has like good versatile answers that fulfill both of those roles. So tapping
Yeah,
down for 3
especially
mana for something that isn't immediately impactful and is not very good in general doesn't seem like a great plan.
yeah, especially creature removal. You just have to be really careful about that when like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I
Or,
think heroism is not likely to see play.
no. All right. Next is Once Shunned, which is a white and a white for an instant, and it reads: This spell costs 1 white less to cast if it targets a black or red permanent, and it says exile target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less.
Mm-hmm.
So the obvious comparison with this is Bewitching Vapors.
Yep. And Bewitching Vapors has seen like a decent amount of play in like white X control lists as a point and click,
Yeah.
just kill a thing spell. And I think that this is like it is seeing play in the current GP. I
Yeah.
think it's probably a meta call. I think this and Bewitching Vapors just end up doing the same thing most of the time.
Right. Also, one thing to note is that Bewitching Vapors, and this is kind of fringe, but you can use Bewitching Vapors on your own stuff in fringe circumstances to gain life.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Villainy costing 3 mana is a notable thing to consider with this card.
So, like for example, like being on, if you're on the draw and they're on the play, they play
Yeah.
Villainy, and then you can use this. It's also good in like I think because right now we're seeing like Adair and Survivor combo decks running around. If you're expecting something like that, then Once Shun's cost reduction clause being relevant is super important to its playability.
Right. Yeah, because 2 mana to get rid of a villainy or disrupt a combo is very useful. Also, it exiles, which is super relevant for Adair and Survivor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of any like, or like not any, but many like costing 4 or more permanents that we have that are relevant. There's like Flesh to Rot and Reflect on Serenity, and I think only really Reflect on Serenity is relevant for control decks.
Yeah.
Mm.
I guess the question with the card is whether it's useful enough to you over Bewitching Vapors to stop certain things.
Yeah, I think it depends on your win con for control, I guess. And I guess yeah, Bewitching Vapors does have like you mentioned like that hidden mode. But yeah, so
Right, because gaining 5 life isn't nothing against some aggro decks, especially once they've run out of steam.
mm-hmm. But also the question is like, would you prefer to use it as a gain 5 life, or do you prefer to have one shunt, which gives you like a cheap way to kill their stuff? And I don't know that there's a right answer. I think it comes down to what's in the meta at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so next up we have Paragon of Purity, which is 1 white for a 2/3 body, which is already a solid stat line. And it says players can't pay alternative costs to cast spells.
Now, this is really interesting. What all does it hit?
This because this set introduces a bunch of stuff with Abound. This hits all of that.
Right.
It hits all of the spirit creatures from Arelu. It a Paragon of Purity hoses like a lot of stuff from the set itself because there's also like the Once Shunned is in a cycle. Like the Once Shunned isn't like a cycle as far as I know. So it hits all.
Yeah, I believe so. So yeah, I mean it's just a good sideboard card.
Yeah, and I think like I can see it being played main deck in like a Hate Bear style deck. I know, just another nerd submitted a white black Hate Bears list, which is similar to Death and Taxes a while back. I could definitely see this being played there.
Yeah, because once it hoses something, it like really hoses that thing. It's very bad. I mean, it's really good against the cards that it hoses.
Yep. So it's just a nice safety valve to have in the format, especially like I think having a safety valve against like stuff in this set itself is just a good thing to have.
Yeah,
because it allows the set to present exciting cards without the worry that those cards could potentially have a negative effect on the meta.
All right. Next up is Stray Seeker Ranger, which is 2 white for a human soldier, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a creature with converted mana cost 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, and it has Conjure white, and it's a 3/2.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of like Knight Captain of Eos, I think is the card.
Yeah,
I'm like,
and
damn.
there's also Scion of Fecundity in the format, which also tutors for a creature with converted cost 2 or less, and can also be played from your graveyard.
Yeah, so I guess the only question is like, are you in straight white or are you in are you in green white? And I think Scion is probably better in most cases because in that deck you're probably green white anyways.
Yeah, and also Scion specific ability Revive allows, I think, gets you the body back. If
Yeah,
I'm not, yeah, it's like in Bomb.
So, while Conjure is just like you only get the ETB.
Yeah. But if you were to play like a mono white build that wants to tutor stuff with converting cost 2 or less, like Hate Bears, for example, then I could see this scene play.
Mm-hmm. So that's it for the white cards. Next up, we're going to be moving into the blue cards, first of which is Almgroove Ambassador. And it's 1 blue for a 1/1. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked, you may untap target creature and remove from combat. Don't think this will see play at all. I don't think that there's any real...
No. It's a cute ability. I don't think it's playable though.
Yeah. Next up is Culminating Conspiracy, which is in this set's cycle of monocolored Escalate cards. And it's 1 blue for a sorcery, and it's either a bounce target permanent or shuffle any number of cards from your hand into your library, then draw that many cards +1. This, unlike the white one, I think is reasonably playable.
Yeah, bouncing any permanent is very relevant.
At sorcery speed, it's slightly worse, but it's
that's true.
powerful.
Yeah, and I like the wheel effect on it. I don't know how like useful it is at sorcery speed, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it reminds me of an sorcery speed Liar's Riddle.
Right.
But one that doesn't sacrifice hand information. So I think this is on like it's a little bit it's like just outside playable, I think, but depending on it could be just like a curve filler or like it could just be used for the wheel effect, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is a weird one. Master of Mass. Do you want to go over this one?
Yeah. Master of Mass is a 0/0 elf shapeshifter with no mana cost. Basically that means you can't cast it from your hand normally, except the text reads, as long as you control an island, you can cast a spell as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, including casting cost. Which is really bizarre.
It's the ultimate clone.
Yeah.
This has like some combo out there waiting for. I don't think you play this as a fair card.
Yeah, I'm sure you can do something with it. I mean, it's useful for copying your own ETBs, like baseline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think if you're going for that plan, I think most of the time you just play more copies of the card you want ETBs for. I feel like this only gets played if you're doing something unfair with it, and I'm not sure what that is yet, but I know that it is out there. I know I'm looking at you, CFT Talk. What are you brewing with this, huh?
Yeah, it's begging to be like broken somehow. It's just one of those cards that's too cool to not see play, you know?
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Once Denied. And I had to blink while reading this card because this is just insane. So ignore the normal casting cost because you're never going to cast it for that. But it's basically 1 blue, counter target red or green spell, and draw a card.
Yeah,
as a sideboard card, this is insane. And
such a good rate.
I don't even know if it's healthy. Like I know it's just a sideboard card, but having like something that's strictly better counterspell in 2 ways in some matchups it feels like a very swingy card to me, and I don't like that.
Yeah. Just thinking about something like Landstorm, I guess. I mean, there's like obviously a lot of ways to counter Landstorm. This just seems kind of brutal, though.
Yeah, it's not even like it's not even that it will hose specific decks. It's just brutally like it's just like a brutally unfun piece of sideboard tech that I think hoses some decks before they can even exist. Like, okay, fine, we have Tenacious Guide in red and green, so you could argue that like red green if versus control, red green decks will just play that anyways, and so that's like a natural like a meta call versus this. I just don't think that this card will ever play in a fun way. Either it's an overcosted counterspell, or it's an incredibly undercosted one, which makes the opponent feel very bad.
Yeah. Notably, and this is true for I think all the once cycle, is it gets a lot better with the MSEM open sideboard thing or delayed sideboard thing that GPs have. Because you can look at the other lists and decide if you want to basically host specific decks.
Yep. I was considering running this in the Pro Tour, but then I specifically decided not to because we don't have open sideboard, so I wasn't sure how worth it would be.
Yeah. I mean, even without open sideboards, like, you could wager that there'd be, like, a deck that has those colors that you could screw over with the card.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Recalculation, which is 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. If they do pay 1, draw card.
Yeah, I don't think this will see play. I think Reconsider does what this card wants to do, except better.
Yeah.
Like, because Reconsider's whole shtick is that it is a taxing counterspell, and then when you no longer need it, you can cycle it. And this basically is both modes are worse because you have less control, or like it's less useful for each of those. So
yeah, giving an opponent a choice is like never the best thing. Like either they'll say, okay, it's not worth the 1, and they'll let you draw a card when they want to, but when you actually want to counter something, they'll be like, no.
A much better card for control, though, is Spectrum Archmage, or Control and Tempo. It's a 3/1 flash flyer for 4, but you can basically bounce a spell when it enters the battlefield, and then you can abound. So abound is a mechanic you're going to be seeing on lots of cards in the set. It basically means that you can cast a card that costs less than Spectrum Archmage from your hand. It's Cascade, except you don't spin the wheel on your library. You just cast it from your hand.
Yeah, so I'd say occasionally better Cascade.
Yeah, you have more control over it, for sure.
Yeah. This card is very good.
It's already in MSEM because it was in one of the master sets.
Right.
And it's seen play in like Sultai Flash before. So yeah, I think
it reminds me of a weird Vendilion clique almost. Like Alright. Next up is Unbound Horizons, which is 1 and a blue for an instant that has Escalate, return another spell you control to its owner's hand. And it has choose one or both, and both modes are draw card.
Yeah, I think returning a spell to your hand is too much of a tempo loss to actually, like, this is either a 1 blue draw card, or it's 1 blue, but also secretly you have to play at least 1 blue more. So
yeah, it's just not that great for what's basically going to be a divination.
Yeah, and that's the best case. That's if you have an instant speed 1 blue. We don't even have we have opt. So if you have opt, you can opt and then in response unbound horizons to make
Yeah,
this an instant speed divination.
so it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And that's it for the blue card.
all right.
Next up, we have the first black card, Aldrin's Legacy. 3 black, 5/4 menace, and whenever it becomes a target of a spell an opponent controls, that spell's controller loses 5 life unless they discard a card. It's a resilient threat.
I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a beater.
I think we have better control finishers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just it's strong, but it's not better than the control finishers we have.
All right. Next up is in the cycle of monocolor escalators, and it is Culminating Despair, which is 1 a black and a black for a sorcery with escalate 2 black. And its modes are destroy target creature, and target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life.
I think of the ones we've looked at so far, I could see this being played the most. At 1 black, you do have Banish, but I think that having the cycling mode for matchups, like assuming that you're mainboarding this, having the cycling mode for like matchups where like removal isn't super relevant, like let's say like the enchantment matchup, having a way to just use it as a card advantage rather than having dead cards main is like a really strong aspect of this card, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, at worst, it's like a murder with occasional upside, or
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's all right. Just have to see if it's worth playing over like other removal spells.
Yep. Okay. Next up, we have Fading Dead. It's 2 black for a 4/2 with other creatures get -1/-1, and it has Conjure for 1 black.
I mean, rep token decks, I guess.
Yeah, we already had Antithesis, Wicked Weaving, all of that. I think Fading Dead is good for like decks that are going to do a lot with their graveyard anyways. Otherwise, you just play Antithesis, I think, is the consensus.
Yeah.
Like, if you're incidentally milling yourself a lot, it's just good sideboard tech. I wonder though if like the static other creatures get -1/-1, if there's some combo with that, like just letting your own creatures die constantly.
And like always replaying them. I could see that. There might be like a card out there or something that maybe hasn't even been printed yet.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully not, but if there is, that's just something to look out for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up is part of the Once cycle. It's Once Betrayed, which is 2 black for an instant that says destroy target creature, but it costs 1 and a black less to cast if it targets a green or white creature.
Yeah, I think we have better options, I think. Like targeted removal in black at instant speed. We actually don't have like a whole lot of it, but we have Strike from the Shadows, which kills everything except Suzume Oshiro.
Right.
And if you're going to be sideboarding, you're going to have like knowledge of your opponent's deck anyways. And Once Betrayed is definitely a sideboard card because having like the base mode of Worst Murder is not worth running this for.
No, and even 1 and a black to just destroy a green or white creature. I think there's like better universal removal.
Yeah, also like there's a decent amount of creatures in those colors which are just recursive or are played in decks where like single target removal is not gonna like they're not gonna care about you single target removing their stuff.
Yeah.
Then we have Refracted Thoughts. Yeah, it's an instant for 1 black, choose target player, and then if a spell or ability would cause them to draw a card, each of their opponents draws a card. So on its face, this seems a lot like an existing card in MSEM, Essence Inversion. It seems to be like a Punisher.
Yeah.
But the reality
it's really
is,
funny against Landstorm.
Yeah. The reality is it's like a combo piece with Ayakin, who's an existing
Oh,
card.
right, yeah.
That's the main use that's being seen with it so far, is that if you use it with Ayakin, so Ayakin basically lets you draw a card every time an opponent draws a card. So you play Refracted Thoughts with Ayakin out, target yourself on your opponent's upkeep. They go to draw step. They draw a card, and then it moves to you trying to draw a card. But then the game's like, actually, no, you don't get to draw a card. Your opponent gets to draw a card. And then your opponent just draws cards infinitely until they die.
Yep. Pretty funny.
Also, I would like to shout out the flavor text here for being, I think, one of the scariest flavor texts in any Magic card. So kudos for that.
Yeah, it's very bleak.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this entire set I think has like, well, I think there's some cards which don't feel super connected. In general, like the individual flavor of the cards and just like the general vibe it conveys are all really good.
Yeah. Some of the art too. I really like the art for this card.
Oh yeah, for sure. So kudos to Hersey for that. So next
All
we
right.
have Shroud and Paranoia. You want to go over this one?
Yeah. Shroud and Paranoia is 1 black and a black for an enchantment. It says if a player would discard 1 or more cards, that player discards that many cards at random instead. And whenever a player discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So I guess if there was like an 8-rack deck in the format, this would be useful. I think with the prevalence of so many graveyard decks running around, I don't know, at 3 mana it's expensive, but there is a lot of self-discard out there.
Yeah, I've played a discard deck before. Like the first deck I ever played in this format was like a red-black like discard-based control deck. I don't know that I would play this. I think there are just better win cons. Like I almost feel like at this cost, you would probably just play Villainy and get away with it.
Right.
But it's definitely like I think if we get a critical density of like effects like this, then like you said, 8-rack could become a thing. So next up is a Darren Survivor.
Oh man, this card.
So this was another one of the cards that was errataed into Mac after it was introduced to the format. And it is also the card that has been the most notable, I think, in the entire set. It's 1 black for a 2/1 that enters the battlefield tapped. But whenever you sacrifice a permanent, you can pay 1 life and return it from the graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, recurring things isn't broken, right?
Yeah, so you might be saying, you know what, Kayiu? That sounds fine on its face. What's wrong with that? And then to that, I would say, please get better card evaluation skills. But also, it loops infinitely with a sack outlet and and like 2 copies of itself. And you can quite easily search for like a sack outlet and another copy of itself with the card Egg of Avarice, which is 2 colorless. You can tap it to sack a creature you control, search your library for a creature card with converter mana cost 1, and then put it onto the battlefield.
Yeah, and there was already a combo deck with Egg of Avarice, so this kind of just slots in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The previous Egg of Avarice deck was reliant on Revert to Moonlight, which is now banned, but this basically just slots into like aggressive, like we had existing like red-black recursive aggro deck, and this just ends up being a combo finisher card for those decks without sacrificing any of their aggro and recursive potential, essentially.
Right. Yeah, it's just a really, I'd say disgustingly good card.
Yeah, it's seeing play in 2 decks in the Pro Tour, 3 decks in the current GP, and it's very much on its way to a rework. It's been pretty much confirmed by the council that is being changed in some way.
Yeah.
So that's it for the black cards. Let's start off with the red ones.
All right. This one's a Rita Study, which is another one of the study cards like we talked about earlier. So it's 1 red and red, and it has the study text and Archive 5. and it reads, you might play the top card of the archive library, and you can't play cards from your hand. So it's like Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, I think there are decks out there that are going to go gaga for this.
Yeah. Every time I think about this card, though, I just think about the, Defector of the Clergy from Arrowloo,
Yeah.
and how much it absolutely hoses this card.
Yeah, which is sad. They both came in at the same time. So Defector of the Clergy basically prevents you from playing cards from anywhere but your hand, I believe it is. So
Yeah.
So if you play Arita Study and they play Defector of the Clergy, it's like a hard lock, which I think this is Arita Study is otherwise like a really dope card, but I think people are being discouraged from playing it because of just like if you main deck Arita Study, people are going to sideboard Defector against you and then just blow you out.
Yeah, it's really sad that they would release like such a good sideboard card against this one so soon, because Experimental Frenzy is a cool card, and this is too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like Experimental Frenzy, but limited to 5 cards, so it's not even like as powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'd be interested to see like some sort of like deck with like 8 Study, like Arita Study and RD Study, and because if RD Study is still out, you can play from RD Study, from the top of RD Study, and you can play from the top of Arita Study.
Right.
Just, like all permanents.
Yeah, and that's just really good like card advantage. It's essentially, I mean, it's one of those things that we call like a 3-mana draw 5.
That description gets me so mad. It's like, it's on the edge of being accurate, but I'm like, no, it's more limited than that. It's not a draw 5.
Especially this one. This one is definitely not a draw 5. It's...
Mm-hmm. Alright, this one has like significant restrictions to it.
Yeah.
So the next card up is Anarchy Storm. It's 2 red for destroy target non-basic land, and then Abound. I think it's fine. I think there's better like Punisher cards, but Anarchy Storm into Abound Imperial Siege will be a very scary line.
Yeah. Like, I really think we have the pieces for a Ponza deck in the format, just because of the large amount of non-basic lands people run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like almost every deck, like there's very little cost to like, or like no one is really playing a deck that like hard punishes people for playing non-basic lands. So people are out here just running shock fetches and running the whole like pain lands, the check duels, just everything.
Yeah. Reminds me of Monger's Angel Touch decks, which ran only non-basics, which is...
Yeah, versus Monger's deck, Anarchy Storm is like a dream come true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like this card won't change anything about that. It'll just, I think at some point, I think people are going to make decks which explicitly punish the non-basic proliferation running around, or like
right.
Okay, next up is Collapsing Realities, which is whenever a land enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to each player, and it's 3 in a red.
It would be good against Trattery Restoration, I think is the card, except it's 4 mana.
Yeah, and it also has like an interesting weird combo with Felice herself, because Felice exiles all permanents.
Right.
But since it's symmetrical, I don't know that's worth it.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting build around. I don't think it'll see MSEM play though.
Alright. Next up is Culminating Chaos, which is 1 a red and a red for a sorcery with Escalate 2 red, so same Escalate cycle you've seen so far. And its modes are either it deals 2 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, or you can exile the top 2 cards of your library and add 2 red until the end of your turn. You may play those cards. I think this is good in burn.
it's also just like it's just very playable, I think, in like control decks in general. Like
Yeah.
it's a 3-mana wipe that also like hitting walkers is really, really relevant, because usually the problem with like going all in on like main deck hate versus creatures is that walkers just stroll in and like walk all over and literally walk all over you. Like
Yeah.
Culminating Chaos gives you like a good game against like walker spam decks.
Right. And it's just both modes are really useful for 3 mana. Like, obviously, it's a little underrate, but still useful. So, I think it's a good card.
Yeah, I expect this one to see play in the future. Next up, we have End of Worlds, which is 8 mana, and each player discards their hand, sacrifices all permanents they control, draw 7 cards, then abound 7 times. You know what?
It is 8 mana, so it won't see play.
It's just a cool card, and I think
It
like
is a very cool card. Especially the art, too.
yeah, I think this will not see play, but I think only because it's like random what cards you're gonna end up drawing. Otherwise,
right.
this is like I think this would be a super cool build around. It's a really sick card. I just like it a lot.
Yeah. It's one of the cards that would be like a flashy mythic in a set.
Mm-hmm. In any other set, but this one I think almost every card is flashy in some way or another. So next up.
All right. Next up is which is part of the once cycle. It's 2 red for an instant that costs 1 red to cast if it targets a white or blue permanent, and it deals 4 damage to target creature or a planeswalker.
Which I think if you're a control I think the problem is like where like not being able to hit face is a real limitation.
Right.
I think it could be a meta call. Like I think this is one of those cards where like the cost reduction on this card matters very little. The real important thing is like, are there cards that that you need to have 4 damage for? If so, then you run one card. Otherwise, you would just run like Shock, Rogar's Frenzy, all of that, because the potential to go face is usually very strong in like any control deck that you're running Burn in. Like Ninus here runs Burn as like control cards, but also as its finishers. Entalon Deep Storage was another control deck that ran Burn as its like removals of choice, but also as its win con. So yeah,
Yeah, also I think something to note is that it is double red, which isn't nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So the decks that like could easily play double red, I don't think would want something that can't hit face.
Fair, yeah. So yeah, I think basically TLDR, I don't think this card will be relevant now, but depending on what comes up in the meta, it could see play.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have Speaker of the Iris. Yeah, you want to hit this one?
You can go ahead.
Okay, it's 2 red for a 3/2 with haste. It abounds on ETB, and everything else you control has haste. It's pretty like the only problem is that it costs 4 mana. So in an aggro deck, are you going?
It reminds me of like Bloodbraid Elf in that it seems like a good mid-range card.
Yeah, like aggressive mid-range. Like, I think like Jundish decks would like love this.
Giving all your creatures haste is really good and definitely plays well with the Abound. Like, you could play this and just get heavy damage in.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this is just a good card. It will see play sometime. Not sure where, but I think like you said, like mid-range or like at the top end of like some mono-red aggressive deck, it will see play. Okay, so now we're getting to the green cards. We have Adarin Scryers, which is 1 green for a 1/1 mana dork, but the catch is that it adds mana that an opponent's land can produce. It's a cute effect. I think it's limited by being only opponent's lands.
Yeah.
We have Mana Ascetic, we have Prismatic Leyline, we have better 1 mana ramp already.
Yeah, I think only being limited to a land an opponent controls is just not that good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up is Consuming Symbiosis, which is 1 green for an instant that has Escalate 1 green and Sacrifice a land. Choose one or more. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power, or target creature gains Trample and Hexproof until end of turn. So you can really easily Goldfish wins with this.
Yeah, like in the GP right now, we have the Bant land effect deck with Arpetian Champion and Duskwood Vanguard. So it functions well because it's also like it is combo protection until you have until you're ready to go off.
Yeah.
And as like a Berserk, it's just you just go all in with this and then you like Berserk them for a crazy amount.
Yeah, all the modes also just really play well with each other. The card was basically made to create like giant creatures. It was built for an infecty type of deck.
Yep. And it's doing its job. I think it's just a solid card. Seeing play right now in a deck, we'll probably see play in like other types of similar infecty decks.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, and that wasn't even the Escalate card. That's not even like the face Escalate card. That was just incidentally. Here we have Culminating Wisdom, 1 green. You either create a beast creature token or it ramps you. I think both of its modes are not worth it for 1 green in this form.
No. There's better mana ramp and better creature creation.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Foliage Hunter, which is 1 and a green for creature with Defender. And it has Death Touch as long as you've cast a spell this turn, and it's a 1/4.
Yeah, it feels like it really feels like something that because it wants you to cast spells on your opponent's turn, right? But then you have to tap out turn 2 for this. And in green, there are better like tempo cards that you play if you're going to be casting spells on your opponent's turn. Like we have Champion of the Fae and like Eat It Want and like stuff that like you can beat face with. And this having Defender severely limits that.
Yeah, it wants to be played in a defensive deck that wants to cast spells on its opponent's turn. I just don't think there's a deck for this card.
Yeah.
It does have really sick art, though. Again, the set just hitting it out of the park with the art.
Yeah. So next up we have the final card of the Once cycle, Once Abandoned. It's 1 green for destroy target enchantment, artifact, or planeswalker. Cost green unless it targets a blue or black permanent. I think it's a solid sideboard card.
Yeah. It's definitely like it's really flexible.
Yeah, I think we do have what is that card that's 2G destroy target non-creature permanent?
It
starts with an R, that's all I remember. Reconstruct. That's
right.
So Reconstruct, we have an instant to 2G, you destroy target permanent or non-creature permanent, and its controller can search their library for a basic land card. So I think the difference is that Reconstruct can hit like non-basic lands, which can be more useful in some situations. Also has a less restrictive cost.
Yeah. But as a sideboard card, I think it could see play.
Mm-hmm. Depends on the meta.
Yeah, it depends on the meta. It is also could be 1 and a green destroy target villainy, which isn't nothing.
Yeah.
Next up is Root Dancer, which is 1 green for a 1/1 that says artifacts and lands enter the battlefield tapped.
There's somewhere for this. I don't know where.
Yeah.
There's somewhere for this.
It is a very Haiti card.
I'm very surprised to see this in green, honestly.
Yeah, and when it like poses a strategy, it poses a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just really slows things down, and it forces like players to play off curve. But since you're in green, you could probably take advantage with that with like land untappers and stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rest in peace, mana aesthetic. Yeah, I think I don't know where this will see play, but I think it's a strong enough effect that someone is going to try brewing with it.
Yeah.
So Seek Refuge, 2 green, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You can reveal a creature or land card from them, put it into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard, and then you can abound. So this is an interesting card. There are lots of knobs on this, which makes me think that people will try to build this. Instant speed, putting stuff into your graveyard, and abound is strong, but we also have the 2 green blue that can just search your library for a card straight up. So I think the reasons to run this over that would be the instant speed and being able to fill your graveyard up.
Yeah. I mean, for the decks that want this, it does do a lot. Like, it digs for something and fills your graveyard, and abound isn't, like, meaningless.
Mm-hmm. And like there's so many places this could see play. I'm pretty excited for this card because it's just a good card on its face, and yeah, and I think that's it for the green cards. Now we're getting into multicolor cards. So the first one is Active Repentance, 1 black green instant. With escalate 1 white. So there's a cycle of basically like off-color escalate cards. And this basically functions as returning 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, or double abound. Which is, I think it's a fine effect for mid-range, but like, I don't know. It's like a little expensive, just a little shy of good.
It's also in, like, I don't think there's a deck in the colors that wants this effect yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could just go straight black and green, not care about the escalate. But at that point, I'd ask, like, why are you playing this as opposed to better cards at that mana cost?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next up, we have Adaran Distractor, which is 1 in a band for 4/3 flash that can bounce a creature you control and bounce a creature an opponent controls to their hands. It's a really nice card. I don't think there's a home for it yet. It's like we don't have a band tempo deck yet.
Yeah, I agree. Also, the mana cost is not something to take lightly, yeah.
And I think at the 4-drop slot, there is Spectrum Archmage, which is arguably better than tempo.
Right.
Okay, next up we have Arida's Assistant, which is...
yeah. So it's blue and a red for a 2/2, which you can tap and discard a card to draw a card from each of your libraries, or you can do 1 a blue and a red, tap, discard your hand, and return each study card from your graveyard to your hand.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how good this is, but it's a very like pushed, obvious build around. So I think trying to brew with this is a good idea.
Maybe some sort of study deck. It notably is a sort of non-bow with Arida's Study, because drawing a card from your library doesn't help you at all with Arida's Study.
One way it does help is like let's say that you're like stuck with a land or something undesirable on top of
never mind.
You can, like,
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think you're right, and like the important thing to remember is like, because Arena Study is only 5 cards, once you clear it up, anything that's in your hand you can play it afterwards anyways. Mm-hmm. So I agree that like it kind of non-bows, but you just have to think about it in a different way as to what it does.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, it's an interesting build around for sure.
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Appeal to the Ancestors, which it costs escalate of 2, base cost 2 black green. It's a sorcery. You either tutor for any card, return a card from your graveyard to your hand, or add black green green. I think with the Abound tutor in the same set, this likely will go overlooked, but it is still a reasonably strong card. Yeah.
Yeah. All the modes are like somewhat useful.
Yeah, I think though probably the most common thing is using this as like a 6-mana tutor something like I forget the name of that. It's the 5-mana tutor that is used in Storm. I don't remember the name for it, but using this as something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, worst case it is like a 2-mana tutor for a card that you can only play once you have 6 mana.
Mm-hmm. So next up is one of the strongest cards from the set, in my opinion. Do you want to introduce this one?
My cards are actually in a different order than yours, so
Okay, so I guess I'll read this out. It's Burgeoning Blooms, which it's Temur, mana, and X for a sorcery, where you draw X times, then abound X times.
draw X cards and abound X times.
Yeah, so this seems just absolutely insane. I think I didn't quite like read this right the first time. So I was just like, yeah, it's okay. And then I realized that like the X cost takes into account, like the X cost is taken into account for the abound.
Yeah, it's insane.
I think the main place this will probably see play is Angel Touched, but it's just a really, really good value card. So
yeah, because even if you cast it for like X equals 2 or 3, at that point you're drawing 3 cards and then casting like 3 5-drops for free.
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, assuming that you're running that many 5-drops.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I mean, even getting like, let's say 2-drop, 3-drop, 5-drop is still just really good, and drawing 3 cards on top of it. And I think X spells like this, because I think Lazer's Altar is a very powerful draw spell, or like draw engine. I think what might keep it in check is having very powerful X draw spells in the format, where your opponents can abuse the mana and then just kind of go off.
Yeah. Also, a deck that like ramps out stuff very quickly might find like a really good use for this as a sort of win con.
Mm-hmm. It's just like digging plus win con, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have Buy Time. It's yeah.
Yeah.
It's 2 blue-black for an instant. Sets your life total to 0. Makes it so that you can't lose the game. Opponents can't win the game. You can't gain life, but you get to take an extra turn.
I just don't see this. It's a very combo-y card. Like if Ad Nauseam existed in the format, it would see play in that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's another like cute card, like in the whatever the Worlds Colliding card was. But this one seems like, yeah, if we do get like an Ad Nauseam style deck, this is like it's reasonably costed enough that this maybe could see play.
Yeah. Other than that, I mean, it only costs 1 more mana to get just a flat extra turn spell.
Mm-hmm.
So
without having to accidentally kill yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also have like challenge. So
yeah.
And we have like
unless
extra
there's
turn spells with upside, like that one green blue extra turn spell from Rail War.
Oh, right. The one that turns into, like, returns all your permanents to your hand or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, unless there's a card that specifically takes advantage of the fact that you can't lose the game on your next extra turn, I don't think this will see that much play.
Okay, next up we have Champion of the Red Dawn, which is red-white for a 2/2 with lifelink. It gives instant and sorcery spells that you control lifelink, and has a 2 red-white copy target instant or sorcery spell mode. Seems like a solid build around.
Yeah. It's definitely a good build around, and it's in colors that would want this effect, so.
I guess the only question would be like, is the lifelink worth it? I think the answer is like, as a burn deck, you sideboard this in versus like, I guess like all in aggro decks, which you like if you're playing like Ninhasir White, for example, I can see this in like an aggro meta playing this, and then just like all of your removal suddenly becomes a lightning helix.
Yeah, it can definitely slow down opposing aggro decks a lot.
Next up, there's Chance at Redemption, which is Obzon for an instant. Each opponent sacks a creature that dealt damage this turn, then you abound. It seems like a very flavorful card, but not one that will actually see play.
Yeah, it's really weird. It does a lot of things that just don't really. It's just not that great. They don't really work together.
Yeah, and like having to wait until something has dealt damage to you to be able to destroy it, not a good time.
No.
Next up, we have Charming Marauder. It is 1 red-green for 3/2, and it destroys target artifact or enchantment on ETB. But importantly, it has Conjure for 2 and a white. So
it's just a really good utility card.
Yeah, like I know DHL had Leisha's Greenblade, which is a similar card, but I think the important part of this one that will set it apart is the Conjure cost. So
yeah, it's just a really good rate for a utility creature, and
I think like given how much we're seeing enchantment decks making the rounds, this has a decent chance of seeing play.
and it's also like not a bad flicker target.
Yeah, just like Lazar's Conjuring the. I mean, I don't know what deck you're playing. You're playing Lazar's Conjuring and this, and that seems like a little bit whack. But if you are,
yeah,
that would be pretty. Just wipe your opponent's entire board. If they're playing like an enchantment deck, of course.
Yeah, 4-color blink deck maybe. I don't know, but
I mean, I think I can see Teamer blinks, and then you just ignore the Conjuring. But yeah, I think the Conjure is like important enough that like, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we have Cognitive Fumigator. It's white and a black for a 2/2. And basically, if you remember Tidehallow's color, this is like Tidehallow's color, except they get to draw a card.
Which I think is better. It's situationally better.
Yeah, does Tidehallow's? I believe Tidehallow's color gives them back the card when it leaves the battlefield.
So, yeah, which is a big thing.
There's pressure to like choose removal when you like see their hand with Tidehallow's color. Here, instead, you can just grab their most like I was talking about a Death and Taxes style deck. Like turn 1 Unmasker of Fates, turn 2 this. That's a pretty strong start versus combo decks, or just like any deck really.
It's that Vendilion Clique effect where it doesn't really matter if they draw a card.
Yeah, because you're taking out their strongest card.
Yeah.
So next up, we have one of the more hyped cards of the set, Conjure Realities. It's 2 green, blue, and you can search your library for any creature, instant, or sorcery card, put it into your hand, and then a bound. So it's basically what it reads is, it basically reads, cast any creature, instant, or sorcery card that costs 3 or less mana from your deck, which is insane.
Yeah,
It's so good.
it's an extremely efficient, basically tutor.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just really good. You can search for a lot of utility stuff. Also, you could possibly assemble creature-based combos.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just good all around. I think
Yeah.
the one thing that may make the 2 and a green version of the C play is see more play, or not more play, but like the reason that would see play at all when this exists is that at instant speed you could possibly like cast it, use it as card advantage, and then like play a counter spell. This being sorcery speed, you can't really find interaction in that same way. Mm-hmm. So next up we have Contemplate Obscurity. It's 1 green and a blue with a black escalate cost, and it's either put target permanent on top of its own library, or for each library, you look at the top 3 cards of that library, put any number of them into its owner's graveyard, then the rest back on top in any order. So basically, you get to like surveil both players' decks, and then also any archives you happen to have.
I think the fact that this is a sorcery does hold it back quite a bit.
Also 3 mana.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, it's effectively like, I mean, it has a removal mode as well, but yeah, it's just like not enough of a raid to have impact in MSEM.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next up we have Crystal Wave. Crystal Wave is already in MSEM and has been like seeing play for a while, so I don't think we need to talk about it again.
Good card. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Equilibrium Paladin. It's 2 white blue for a 3/4 flash that has a humility effect. Oh, sorry, it's only creatures that enter the battlefield that turn get humilityed.
It's really weird. I'm not sure what this would be useful against.
Yeah, it feels like it's trying to be like used against like decks with cheat in creatures, but also like 4 mana is a really hefty cost.
Yeah. Like, it almost feels like a card you'd want to play against a deck that made infinite creatures, per se, but then it doesn't actually help you against that.
Actually, I would have to ask a judge about that. But then if you play this against Dragon Twin, if they lose all abilities, does that mean they no longer have haste?
I would think so.
So that could be like a niche use for it. But then also, like, if you're playing against Dragon Twin, you would probably just want to play better cards that disrupt their combo, not like silver bullets like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so don't think I'll see any play. Next up we have Fallacy's Channeler, which is 1 black-red. Whenever it becomes untapped, each player sacrifices a creature, and then you can tap it and pay 1 life to have it ping something. But without a way to untap it, I don't like. It just seems like such a weird card. It's pulling in so many different directions, and like I don't think you can even like reasonably go infinite with it without having it be like a 5 or 6 card combo.
No. And like, putting MSEM aside though, in like a multiplayer format, having each player sacrifice a creature, can be pretty bad for certain players. Like, it'll always be bad for at least one person on the table if you're playing like MSEDH, for example.
Yeah, I think this is like a reasonably cool card in MSEDH.
Yeah.
Yeah, in MSEM, I don't think it'll, unless there's some combo potential I'm missing with it, I don't think it'll make the cut in MSEM.
Yeah, and also like the prevalence of graveyard decks in the format automatically makes like cards that allow a player to choose what they sacrifice bad.
Yep. Next up, we have Fallacy Sanctifier. It's a 3/2 flash for 1 white-black, and when it enters the battlefield, you can exile up to 3 target cards from graveyard. It also has a Conjure too. Again, I think in a Death and Taxes deck, as like a sideboard card versus grave decks, pretty damn good.
Yeah, allowing you to like pick and choose specific things to like take out is pretty cool.
And also, like, I can also see it just being played in grave decks as like incidental, like, hey, I'm milling the heck out of myself, but also I have a way to deal with other grave decks.
Yeah.
And because it has no colored cost, I could see it's being played in like off-color decks. Like, let's say like decks with like Wealth of the Underbrush or something. Maybe this could see play.
Right. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
So next up, there's In Tragedy. It's part of the off-color Escalade cycle. It's red, black, Escalade green. And basically, if you put it all together, it's Death Touch, Indestructible, Fight, which even altogether, I don't think it's worth playing.
Yeah, it's like Jund removal, but you can play cards that actually remove things and don't require you to have a creature on the table.
Yeah. And that aren't 3 mana straight up.
Yep. I mean, great flavor though, and cool art. So.
So, Inspire Actuality. Now, this is an insane card, in my opinion. It's instant speed, 1 white blue with the Escalade cost of 1 red, and you either untap all creatures you control or take an extra turn after this one and skip your untap step.
It's just a really good rate. I mean,
yeah, it feels like a side version of Fated Challenge. Like Fated Challenge, obviously by virtue of being monocolor and allowing your creatures to untap normally, is probably better. But this being instant speed could have some applications. And I could see like some deck that wants multiple cheap extra turn effects just playing this.
And like imagining it as a base rate of 1 and Jeskai, draw a card, and you get an extra combat step isn't bad. But it's obviously better than that.
Yeah, for sure. So next up is Litany of Renewal. This is like a group hug card. It's Naya for everybody can play an extra land, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, both players draw a card. This is an MSEDH card. It will not see play in MSEM.
No, but group hug is something I like doing in MSEDH, and this is a cool card for it.
Yep. So yeah, if we do see more people playing, I think if anything, this set will hopefully encourage people to like play more MSEDH, because the more I'm looking through it, there's like a lot of just like fun build arounds for MSEDH.
Yeah, and more people need to be playing MSEDH.
Yep, I heard some people throwing around like MSEDH Dual Commander Brawl recently. So if they are, hopefully they're looking at these sets to like pick up ideas from.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up is Mirror Plate Exemplar. It's Jeskai, and if you cast a spell that only has 1 target, you copy it for every other target, and it's any player. So
God, again, great MSEDH card. I mean,
yeah, and I don't know if is there an MSEM combo with this? Maybe. I don't know the card pool. I'm not aware of the card pool that much, but there might be like some deep combo that works with this. But yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
It's just such a unique effect.
Yeah, activating for any player is just really funny.
It can definitely lead to like some shenanigans.
Yeah.
Like, if they try to like remove your creature, but they accidentally wipe their own board as well.
Yeah. It could just lead to really fun interactions. It's a really unique card. I like it a lot.
Yep, it's just fun. Mystic of Many Winds is another one of those cards. It's Esper, 1/4 for 3. And basically, whenever you cast a spell, you exile the top card of your library, and both players can cast spells that are exiled with Mystic of Many Winds.
Yeah.
So again, it's a chaos card for MSEDH.
Yeah, whenever I see an effect that affects all players, I just think of MSEDH.
Yeah, it's like that butterfly meme. Like, is this an MSEDH plant?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just a fun card, and it reminds me so much that people really need to play MSEDH more.
Mm-hmm. Just like subtly like flashing on screen right now, like some subliminal messaging. Play MSEDH.
Yeah, please.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have Ophidian Oracle, which is 3 mana for 5 mana for with 3 blue-red for a 3/3, which draws a card and then abounds on ETB. It also has a Conjure of 2 green. Seems like a solid value card, but too expensive compared to some of the other options here. Like, I think if you're playing Teamer, you would rather have the X cost spell than this any day of the week.
Yeah, I could see it being somewhat useful with Wealth of the Underbrush. 3 green, you get a 3/3 and a card costing 4 mana.
Mm. Also, I guess another thing is like I could see like this would be absurdly expensive, but then casting this and then playing Lazarus Conjuring on it.
Yeah, I mean, any of the bound creatures just get super good with Lazarus Conjuring.
Mm-hmm. Next up is Repent, Daughter of Fallacy. It's 1 and a Mardu for a 3/3 lifelink that deals 3 damage to any target whenever it blocks or becomes blocked. Not relevant in MSEM.
No.
Then you have Rubble Tender, which is 6 mana, so probably not relevant. It's a XX trample for 6 mana, 4 RG. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands in your graveyard, and then you sack a land at the beginning of your upkeep, and then you search your library for 2 lands.
Yeah, could be useful in a loam deck, but again, just costs too much.
Yeah, it's too expensive to see play. Then Seeker of New Horizons. It's 3 green-white for a 3/5, which searches the top 3 cards of your library for a permanent, or you can conjure it for a 1 and a blue. If anywhere, I think this will see play because of the conjure cost. I don't think there's anything. I don't think it's worth playing it for the base body because it's 5 mana.
Yeah. But self-milling this and playing it for conjure is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have Starvation, which is a junk sorcery, which is just each player sacrifices half the creatures they control. I don't think it's worth it because we have better wipes at this cost. It's a cute wipe, but it's not a good one. It's very flavorful.
I would also like to... Man, this art is so cool.
Yeah, Hersey has like a knack for finding like just really like evocative, cool art.
Yeah.
Actually, this one I have no idea how this one represents Starvation. Like some of the others feel like more relevant.
But the art in a vacuum is just really good art.
Oh yeah, for sure. Next up, we have Theurgist of the Depths, which is 2 and a Sultai, which it's basically like a kind of clunky draw from your graveyard spell. It basically factor fictions from your graveyard for each permanent type, which is it's a cool effect, but I don't think it's MSEM playable at 5 mana.
Yeah, it's just
even with the
really clunky.
Like the conjuring, like the conjure is like gives us like some legs, but I think You have a bound stuff in this set, which allows you to just cast stuff for free. Putting stuff in hand is like weak in this deck. Card advantage?
Yeah.
Nah, you need board advantage. Two Worlds cheapens. It's green and a white for an instant, which cheapens your next creature and lets it be cast flash speed and doubles any ETBs it may have. Unless there's a combo with this, I don't think it's worth running. It's
No.
yeah. Like you want every card in your deck to be impactful. You don't want it to be like a minor enabler for a different one.
Yeah. It's just like really inflexible. It's not worth a slot in a deck.
Mm. Next up, we have Wicked Blow, which is red and a white for an Escalate black, and basically it's either a lightning strike or you can, if you pay the black, you can turn it into a lightning helix. But I think with Felor Charm already being a good, like a better lightning strike for the same cost, I think this just gets outclassed.
Yeah, it's just really restrictive costing if you want it to be anything more than a lightning strike.
Mm-hmm. Next up, there's Withering Husk, which is a blue and a black for a 2/1 creature, which whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may discard a card and pay 1 life. And if you do, then you draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. This is like, I think it's like, it's costed, like at 2 mana, I think this is like, maybe, like, it's playable. I could see it being played.
Yeah. I think it's really, I wouldn't say self-synergistic, but it just has a really good effect, I guess is how I'd put it.
Yeah, I could see this in like Suzume Oshiro type decks, but ones which want more graveyard, want to like stuff their graveyard. Because it's in Grixis colors, which is perfect for that. It
Yeah.
might get beat out by Imperial Artisan because Imperial Artisan typically has a better body and is better because brainstorming is better than like looting. But if you have like a more graveyard focused Suzume Oshiro deck, this is I think a shoe-in for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it for the multicolor cards, and we're into the home stretch now with colorless cards.
All right. I'll go ahead and do the colorless cards.
Cool.
So first up we have Fate Charm, which is 2 generic artifact, and you pay 1 and tap it to exile the top 2 cards of your library, then put a card exiled with Fate Charm, any of the exiled cards, on top of its owner's library.
Mm-hmm.
It's card filtering, I guess. It's really slow.
I think if both the ability and the card itself cost 1 less, it could see play in like an eggs type deck. Well, not eggs, but like just like anything that wanted cheap artifacts. As it is, it's just like it costs 1 too much.
Yeah. Next up is Fate Seeker's Orb, which is 4-mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, for each of your libraries, look at the top card of that library, then put it at the top or bottom of that library. And then you can, for 2 generic and 2 life, you can just draw a card.
Yeah, that pay 2 and pay pay 2 mana and pay 2 life draw card. I could see that being the part of some combo,
Yeah.
I don't know where, but yeah.
It functions not as good, but almost like ability run hit study.
Mm-hmm.
Like sort of.
Yeah. And I think since you already have perfect library information for your studies anyways, this scry it's not super useful.
Right. But the activate ability is good, so maybe.
Yeah. Again, I think this is another case of like if it costed 1 less, then I might consider it.
Yeah. Next up is Paradox Rings, which is a 0-mana artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it, and also pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color, and then you put a charge counter on it. And then you tap it, remove 3 charge counters, and sacrifice it to draw a card.
So this is an eggs card. This is what an egg
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah, I mean, 0-mana artifact, eggs. Alright. Next up, Poison Tonic, which is 2-mana artifact. Whenever a player gains life, that player loses 2 life.
I feel like this is... It's either a meme, or you're gonna like try to combo someone out with this. Like, I know that like there's Yu-Gi-Oh combo decks, which are like, Yu-Gi-Oh is a very different game, but I know there's like a Yu-Gi-Oh combo deck which focuses on like essentially like playing, because gaining your opponent's life is at a way higher rate than like dealing damage to your opponent. So you play a burn deck, except you have you just have a card which converts all life gain into damage.
I feel like this would be more combo-y if it said whenever a player gains life, that player instead loses 2 life.
Yeah, this way, like, if the life gain is equal to or greater than 2, then this is just useless. I would actually advocate for a buff for this card.
Yeah. Because even just adding the word instead makes it, like, not broken, but you can, like, build around it.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up is Potion of Inhibition, which has been changed.
Yep, it now costs 2 mana, flat, and at the beginning of each upkeep, if it's an extra turn, you end the turn, and if a player would search a library, instead that player searches the top 4 cards of their library instead. It's basically a hate, like a sideboard hate artifact.
Yeah, limiting search to the top 4 cards has been proven to be, like, a detrimental effect, especially with, like, fetch lands.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I honestly forgot that affected fetch lands. That's very powerful, especially in a format where everyone is using shock fetches.
Yeah. And 2 mana is the standard rate for all, think, like, Aven Mind Sensor and normal Magic. Is 2 mana, and this is also colorless.
Wait, Aven Mind Sensor is 3 mana, I think.
Is it 3 mana?
Yeah.
I thought it was 2 for some reason. Yeah.
You might be thinking of Leonin Arbiter, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good hate card. And the extra turn stuff isn't, like, negligible either.
Yeah, for sure.
Alright, next up is Seeking Sword, which is a 2-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. And at the beginning of your end step, if you don't control a creature, create a 1/1 human and attach the sword to it.
Wasn't there like an equipment exactly like this that just came out in like a recent set?
I'm trying to remember.
It was ETB, I think, that it created a token. It was like 1 and a white.
Recall anything like that. I know there was like an Amonkhet, there was the cartouche that was like an aura that created a 1/1 on ETB.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna quickly look this up because obviously, like, I heard he made this way before. I just want to like see like what that card is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Ancestral Blade in M20. It's 1 and a white when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token and then attach Ancestral Blade to it, and equipped creature gets +1/+1.
Oh, so it's almost like a living weapon.
Yeah. It's basically this card, except Seeking Sword creates a creature every end step and is also colorless, so it's a better card.
Yeah, ultimately though, I don't think it's good enough to get played.
Yeah. Infinite slow 1/1s, not really playable. Bad equipment, not really playable. Is a cool card, but it's not MSEM playable.
No.
Okay. And I guess we have a bunch of lands here. So I guess the 5 filter lands I don't think will be super relevant. We have way better mixing.
Yeah, and just like the cards basically taps to add colorless. You can pay 1 life to add a specific color, then can pay that specific color and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Not really that useful.
Mm-hmm. Artist Vista is one of many 5-color lands in MSEM, because I think all the other 5-color lands are better because they don't.
I don't like ramping the opponent.
Yeah, I think this is now. You know what this is useful in? MSEDH for group hug decks.
There you go. God, so many MSEDH goodies in this set. We should all just start playing MSEDH.
You know, like, you know how the set code is MAC? That actually stands for MSEDH.
Yes.
Awesome and cool.
Yes. Everyone, please start playing MSEDH.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good thesis statement to end this on. Everyone, please play MSEDH.
Yeah. They keep printing good cards for MSEDH, but nobody plays it.
Yeah, and I think that's just a function of, as the player base grows, so too will the number of people who are interested in playing it casually versus competitively.
Yeah.
So I think just to end this off, I think we should each choose what we think, like, anywhere between 1 and 3 cards that you think will be very impactful from the set, and then why you think that.
All right. Let's do that real quick.
Mm-hmm. I am not going to choose Adaran Survivor because it's getting changed, but I think Conjure Realities and Burgeoning Blooms.
Yeah.
I think are 2 for me. Yeah.
It was definitely gonna choose Burgeoning Blooms and Conjure Reality. I'm trying to think of what else was super good. Obviously Spectrum Archmage, but that was already in the format.
Yeah, I think Culminating Chaos, Seek Refuge, and Arita Study are other good cards.
Yeah, Arita Study especially, I think, would be so good if Defector of the Clergy didn't exist.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's still a good card, but when such a specific hate card exists, it really de-incentivizes people to play it.
Especially I think I almost wish if that change had happened to Defector of the Clergy, it had happened next rotation, because now no one is brewing with this really exciting new card because they're afraid of getting blown out.
Yeah.
It was just kind of an incidental kill because it was meant to hose Artie Study, which has been a staying force in MSEM throughout many meta changes.
Right. And it was good for that purpose, but it's just really sad to see a cool card just not be played.
Yep.
Especially when it was just released.
A month ago. The same rotation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that wraps it up for our set review.
Yep. Thanks for joining me. This was really fun, as always.
Yes. As more sets come out, we're looking forward to maybe releasing more of these.
Yeah. And hopefully at next rotation, maybe we can do a pre-review, because we will know what sets are on the table for coming in. So we could probably do a pre-review and say which of these we think is the best.
Yep. And if I were to end this off with any statement, it would again be lots of cool MSEDH cards. Please play.
Cut the tape. We've got all the footage you need.